I'm now the CEO of Geo, which is a core dev at The Graph. I've been working on helping to make Web3 real for 7.5 years. So if you haven't accomplished your goals yet, don't feel bad. We're going to be talking about knowledge today, that elusive thing. By the way, did you guys hear about the UFOs? Like what's going on? I mean, there's rumors. It could totally be real, right? Like there could be UFOs. I'm trying to figure it out. I can't tell where we're at. I wonder if you have this feeling sometimes, right? Where it's hard to know what's real. Like, how do you know? And core to this issue is we now have the internet. Everybody's connected. Everybody's got opinions. And we might need a hotspot. Sorry, just 1 second. The ownership is on chain, right? And then off chain, you have this metadata, right? The metadata for the application, the images, this name, description, this kinds of things. But that metadata, it's a fixed structure. And so as you have new types of NFTs, you want to build different types of applications. Maybe you want to do token gating. Maybe you want to do IP. How do you structure that information, and how do you make sure you can support different types of applications? We never really quite got there, the way that we build these apps with this JSON fixed schema anchored on chain. Now we have Web3 social, right? And social is super exciting, right? It's an obvious use case for Web3. We want to be able to have different applications. You want to be able to have composability, take your follower graph with you. But even these social applications that we're using, they have these kind of fixed schemas, right? Like you define a post. But which applications are social and which aren't social? Almost any app can really be social, right? And do we want to be limited to posts? What if you have jobs? What if you have products? Articles, research papers, all these different types of things. So what we need is flexible ways of describing information and extending it across applications. So last year, I published a blog post called Knowledge Graphs Are Web3. Raise your hand if you've heard of knowledge graphs. Okay, we got a few people. So in this post, I describe Web3, and Web3 is a new platform for decentralized applications, right? And it's an open, verifiable, composable web. And so far, we're doing pretty well in the crypto industry with verifiability and with openness. We have these decentralized networks. We have infrastructure protocols. Right? Today, we have like a ton of infrastructure protocols. When we founded the Graph, we were one of the very first. But what we don't have is a composability. Right? We still don't have like a universe of interoperable information-based applications. And to me, that's what like Web3 is going to look like. Right? It's Web3. It's a new platform with open infrastructure. Right? You don't want vendor lock-in. You don't want to have to take platform risk, where people own their data. Right? That's what people want, to not be like controlled by. You have their data like locked in applications that are controlled by corporations. You want your private data to be private, right? Like actually secure. You want public information to be verifiable. And you want all of that to be interoperable across applications, right? We need to break free from these data silos. So, I think that is Web3. Now, on Ethereum, we had this ERC20 standard, right? And with that one very simple primitive, that unlocked DEXs, that unlocked lending, that unlocked this whole flourishing universe of DeFi. And DeFi is amazing. But what we haven't seen is this proliferation of information-based apps right outside of finance. And so what we need is that type of a primitive, right? Like an individual unit, a primitive for composable knowledge to build interoperable knowledge-based apps beyond DeFi. So what is knowledge? Well, data you can think of as like the raw bits, right, that are maybe like on a blockchain, for example. And then information is when you decode the data and you put it into a structure, right? So think of like tabular information. And then knowledge is when you link and label and you create connections between the information to get a higher level of understanding. Right? And you can think about how your own brain works. When you're learning something, when you're creating knowledge, you're making connections between things. Oh, this is kind of like that. Right? This contradicts something else that I saw. You're making these connections, and it's in those free-form connections that you turn information into knowledge. So GRC20 is a new knowledge graph standard, a primitive for knowledge. And it starts with entities. And anything can be an entity. You can have an entity for a person, for a place, for an idea, right? It's all just entities that are interconnected together. So you can have an entity for like a city here. And importantly, you want all of the entities to have globally unique IDs. Right? So if you're referencing the city of San Francisco, what ID are you using for that? Right? Is every app have its own ID, and then how do we know if we're talking about the same things or different things? So we need globally unique IDs. The atomic unit in knowledge graphs and in GRC20 is the triple, an entity attribute value. This is like the atom of knowledge. Right? The entity is the entity ID. The attribute is the property of the thing that you're describing. So for example, a birthday, and then the value is the value. Now, interestingly, the way that we reference the attributes, it's also by ID. And so that way, you can change the names of things over time. And with JSON, you can't do that once the data has been created. So this is truly an interoperable thing. If you have a little datum, a little fact that's in this kind of a format, any application can interpret this, can know exactly what you're talking about, and that's how we get interoperability, by defining the right types of atoms. From there, we have a few native types. These are the native types in GRC20. And from there, you can create higher level types. right? So you can define a type like a place or a person. These are higher level types where you define the properties that could exist on those things, but it's very flexible, right? Here an entity can have many types, and so this gives you a really flexible way of structuring your information. And then you can create relations, free-form relations between all of your different entities, and that's what forms a graph. So for example, we can say that Byron works at Geo. Right, so this is a relation between the person Byron and the project Geo. And what we have here is we implement a property graph model. So with a property graph, you can actually add facts to the relation itself. And this is not something that you have in most like database systems that you're familiar with. So for example, the fact, what Byron's roles are, that he's a software engineer, or when he started working, those are properties of the relation itself. And so putting all of this together, we can create a graph, right? A global graph of all of the world's public knowledge and information that's organized and served in a decentralized way. You can build custom applications on top of this. The information can be verifiable, it can be open, it can be composable, and we can, have the tools to start to, make sense of the world around us. So there's a lot of places that we could start with this because it's very broad. You can build any kind of application on top of knowledge graphs. So one area that we're starting is with crypto news. Getting back to that, news problem. So we have a set of editors that have been going through and organizing, breaking news in the crypto industry, and they tag, here are the related projects, here are the related people, here are the facts. And we're trying to create blockchain-based record of the facts as they happen. We're going to start sharing more of this stuff out publicly, and you could imagine having a global hive mind of people that are contributing to that. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? Structuring all of this stuff. And so we think this is going to be one interesting area that people that are interested in news keep an eye out for. And we recently announced GeoGenesis. This application that we're using is now open for early access. So GeoGenesis is an app where you can organize knowledge, and you can create communities, and you can get communities to consensus on shared facts. You can use this for DAOs, for protocols, for your companies. Think of a Notion, right? But like a Web3 Notion, and where the knowledge is all an interconnected knowledge graph. So if you want to play around with GeoGenesis, you can request your early access. Mention that you're from ETHDenver, and we can speed you up on the list. And, we're at this phase of Web3 where we've been building the infrastructure for a while. And some people are maybe curious, what's this stuff going to be used for, right? Is it just for finance or what? And I believe that when we put all of the right pieces together, we're going to rebuild everything on top of this foundation, right? There's no reason to use software where your data is trapped and controlled by a single corporation. And so we are going to rebuild everything on top of this solid foundation. And you all are going to be the people to do this, right? If you use the right primitives. Thank you.